College football playoff rankings dropped last night. It was our third installment in the 2023 rankings. Shout out to you if you stayed up for that. There was some basketball going on, or at least I was told college basketball in my mind doesn't start until March. Another video for another time. But the College Football Playoff Committee made a couple of tweaks, or I guess one rather big tweak when it came to that top 6. You had Oregon at 6. You had Washington still at 5. Now, I thought Washington did enough to leapfrog Florida State. It's not talking down on Florida State. I think it's a testament to Washington and the way that they beat Utah. Nice little ranked win. Also, they have that top 10 win over Oregon. It is what it is. If Washington and Florida State both run the table, they will be in the college football playoff. We all understand that. Florida State, you're happy to still be at 4. What we said last week is still true this week. If you handle business and if you continue to keep that donut in the loss column, you will also be in the college football playoff, much like Washington. So 4 or 5 for either of those teams. You don't worry about it. You just keep a good thing going, tip your hat, and move on. At number 3, you got Michigan. At number 2, you got Ohio State. And at number 1, you got the Georgia Bulldogs. And that's what I really want to talk about right now in this segment. To me, this was the right move based on one thing, watching football. Because if you look at resume, you could split hairs a little bit here, but you're probably still leaning resume-wise towards Ohio State. Top 10 win on the road, top 10 win at home against Penn State. Georgia, they have one top 10 win over Ole Miss, have a really solid top 15 win over Missouri at the time. Missouri now finding their way into the top 10, so maybe that boosts Georgia just a little bit. But the reality is both those wins were at home for Georgia. Ohio State went on the road and got one. So resume, again, you're splitting hairs. 2 phenomenal resumes, but you probably lean resume towards Ohio State. Then the eye test for Michigan, I know there were 3 last night, but if you want to talk about just being dominant, across the board, early in the year, Michigan, I know they weren't playing anybody. I'm not talking about that, but just average margin of victory for them was 35 points. It's ridiculous. Michigan, again, early in the year, probably more dominant. But this is the right decision based on what I just said. When you watch football, this is the best team in America. And it's a nice statement on the box score with them having that 52-17 win over a top 10 Ole Miss. It's a statement. There's no way around it. But the biggest thing for me when we talk about Georgia and why we felt so strongly about Georgia being the number 1 team in the country, even before this poll, we have our own poll, the Nothing But Ball poll. And that drops every Sunday, and we talk about it on our live show on this channel. We break down our top 10 teams, so go check that out if you haven't already. Not right now, finish the live show. But what I want to make sure we say is we already thought Georgia was the best team in the country because there's no weaknesses when you look at Georgia. And that sounds hyperbolic, but legitimately, I have the least amount of questions about Georgia than I would anybody else in the country. Ohio State, you're yeah, they have a great resume, but is quarterback play going to come back and bite them at some point? Yeah, Michigan had a great win against Penn State, but I still would like to see them play a little bit better competition consistently. For Georgia, what is the one thing that you're asking about them that you really feel concerned about? Inexperience? Having to play some young guys? Injuries? Is that really what we're asking about Georgia? That's our main concern. If that's the main concern when it comes to Georgia, I think that speaks volumes to where they're at right now. Because right now, again, they have no weaknesses. Scoring 40 a game, number 6 in the country. Holding teams to 17 a game, number 7 in the country. They're top 20 in pass and rush defense. Okay, they're running for almost 200 yards a game. They're throwing for over 300 yards a game. Hat tip Carson Beck. Looks like there hasn't been a huge letdown from Stetson Bennett leaving for the NFL. What does this mean? That's great they're multiple. It's great they don't have any weaknesses. What does that actually mean when it comes to their college football playoff aspirations and where they stand in the college football landscape today? To me, it just says Georgia can win any kind of game. Hey, if we got to get into a shootout, we like Carson Beck. We got Brock Bowers back in the lineup. We got Dominic Lovett. We got Ladd McConkey. We got weapons now. If we want to play that kind of game, we can go score for score with you. Or it's a thing where we got to go field position, game control, take the air out of the football. Dejan Edwards and Kendall Milton are putting on clinics right now with how they tote the rock. That offensive line for Georgia starting to get back healthy a little bit more week in and week out. I put my money on Georgia in that situation as well. Defensively, we already said it. Yeah, they're playing some young guys due to injury. They're stepping in and playing phenomenal. And so, again, they can win any kind of game that you ask them to. That's dangerous because I promise you, when it comes to those games in the college football playoff and when they play Alabama in the SEC title game, I think that's probably an expectation that you will have to play a different style of game as your opponent gets better and better. I mean, we saw it last year in the game against Ohio State. Different roster, same Kirby Smart coached football team, had to go and go score for score with Marvin Harrison Jr. and C.J. Stroud, and they were able to do that. This team, obviously different pieces, different quarterback, different coordinator, same kind of traits, built the same way. They can still win any kind of game, is where I'm coming from. And so Kirby Smart, he gets a ton of credit, and he should. He is right now the best coach in the country. I'm not saying of all time. I'm saying right now, Kirby Smart, there's nobody better. He's got 2 natties to show for it. And he deserves a ton of credit, and he's going to get a lot of credit for talent acquisition. And he should, yet again, like everything that Kirby Smart is being told, or everything that we're saying about Kirby Smart, rather, as to how great a coach he is, all true. But I think the thing that maybe gets overlooked is the way that he fosters internal leadership. Because you can have a lot of talent. You can have a great staff. But if your great staff doesn't empower great leadership within that roster and doesn't cultivate that, then we're missing the key piece here. We're missing the key piece. I can know what to do. I can know how to do it. But if I don't have an internal standard set by my teammate, the accountability, then what are we doing here? Again, missing that key piece, that key ingredient that's going to tie this whole thing together. And so what I think should get a lot of credit is the locker room and the guys that have taken up that gauntlet of leadership. Like Kirby Smart, if you listen to him talk, he will reference fairly frequently his leadership council, which is essentially a group of players that have taken it upon themselves and have been, I don't know if it's voted on by the team or if the coaching staff selects them, but they have been essentially dubbed the guys. You are the leaders. You are the tone setters. You set that standard. You uphold that standard. Guys like Cedric Van Prant, Ladd McConkey, Javon Bullard, guys that have been there and understand what it takes to win and are now taking it upon themselves to keep that standard where it's at. And so if those guys aren't doing a tremendous job, if they're not keeping that standard where it is, then the talent is secondary. Because talent gets you in the building. Georgia has the talent to be in the room for a national title yet again. We all understand that. Bama's also in that room. Ohio State's in that room. Michigan's in that room. Florida State's probably in that room. A lot of talent. But again, if you don't have that culture and that leadership to kick the door down, it's all for naught. And so the scary thing now, yes, the culture, the standard, all those things are in place. That's why they've been as good as they have, paired with the talent. But the scary thing, I think, is this team, I don't believe, has played their best game of football just yet. Ole Miss was probably close, but I think they're even going to get better because week in and week out, they don't have the same weaknesses. And we said this on our live reaction last night to the college football playoff rankings. Like Georgia, the question early on was, well, are they going to be able to set the edge? We've seen them get gashed on some perimeter runs. That Auburn game sticks out in your mind. The Missouri game sticks out in your mind. And then Ole Miss came in running a ton of jet sweep, attacking the perimeter. Georgia, playing with some young cats, I thought did a phenomenal job neutralizing that part of the Ole Miss offense. Not that it was non-existent, but that it was a weakness previously. It didn't look like a weakness to me in that spot. In a spot where it could have been exposed if it had stayed a weakness. That tells me this is a team now. Not complacent, not ready to rest on their laurels. They're going to take strides each and every week, watch the film. They're not saying, great, we're the number 1 team in the country. They're not going to say, great, we're top 4. Awesome, clinched the East. Yes, going to Atlanta. Can't wait. That's not the way that they're built. They're not wired that way because of Kirby Smart and because of that locker room, because of that leadership council. Other thing I would say, that should be scary for the rest of college football. Georgia went through a phase of their season where they were without the best player in the country in Brock Bowers. I understand there's a case for a lot of other players. I would also probably label Marvin Harrison Jr. the best player in the country. I would probably also label Jaden Daniels the best player in the country. Like that title, I think, can get passed around with some validity. Bottom line, Brock Bowers, one of, if not the best player in the country. So we're clear. Whenever he was in the lineup, you leaned on him because that's what you do with great players. Anytime you have an Avenger playing tight end for you, yeah, he's going to be a part of your offensive game plan. He'll be a focal point of the offense. But then he was subtracted from the lineup. He wasn't in there, and so what'd you have to do? You had to make up for that production. We said it a lot. As soon as Brock Bowers got hurt, hey, he was accounting for 25% of Carson Beck's passing yards up to that point. That's a quarter of his passing yards now that has to be replaced. A quarter of his decisions that he makes that has to be replaced. So, with that being said, you asked more of guys like Dominique Lovett, of Oscar Delp, of Ra Thomas, of Ladd McConkey when he got back healthy. And so when you put more weight on those guys, when you leaned on those guys more heavily, what happened? They answered the call to action. They lifted that weight. They got stronger. And so now you add Brock Bowers back into a lineup with a bunch of playmakers that got stronger, with Carson Beck who was able to elevate his game with Brock Bowers out of the lineup, and they're firing on all cylinders. We saw them score 52 over Ole Miss. Y'all, I don't think that's a coincidence that you got Brock Bowers back in the lineup and saw that offensive explosion continue to surge against a good Ole Miss team. So what I want to make sure we say is they're only going to get better. I truly believe that. And again, we had Georgia to be our national champion before the season. We had them as our national champion after week 6. Right now, I'm sitting here telling you I don't see a weakness. I would have a hard time picking against Georgia the rest of the way. For us today, they are still our pick to win the national title until they give us a reason otherwise. So Georgia, number 1 again when it comes to the college football playoff rankings. That G is back atop the standings. I'd be surprised if it went anywhere anytime soon. I cannot wait to watch how they attack the rest of the season because they got the talent, they got the culture, and they lack the complacency. Georgia's going to put the rest of the college football world, I think, continue to put the college football world on notice. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.